You're tuned in and locked on. Gay News Radio with Brandon Carmody. Only on the GNR Radio Network.
You're listening to Gay News Radio. I am Brandon Carmody. Our guest today is the author of The Cross in the Closet, Timothy Kurek. And just so that our listeners can get the backstory from our prior interview, here is a description of his experience and the reason that he wrote The Cross in the Closet. Timothy Kurek, raised within the confines of a strict conservative Christian denomination in the Bible Belt of Nashville, Tennessee, was taught the gospel of separation from a young age, but it wasn't long before Timothy's pain and the outside world converged when a friend came out as a lesbian and revealed that she had been excommunicated by her family. Distraught and overcome with questions and doubts about his religious upbringing, Timothy decided the only way to emphasize and understand her pain was to walk in her shoes of the very people he had been taught to shun. He decided to come out as a gay man to everyone in his life and to see for himself how the label of gay would impact his life. In the tradition of Black Like Me, The Cross in the Closet is a story about people, a story about faith, about one man's abominable quest to find Jesus in the margins. Once again, welcome to Gay News Radio, Timothy Kurek.
Thank you for having me. It's so good to be back.
And yes, now does that pretty well accurately describe your 1 year of walking in the path of the label of gay? Is that a pretty fair description? I know there's a lot of nuances and a lot of pain and specifics within that journey, correct?
Yeah. It's when you're talking about anything that covers such a large span, just if you think about in your daily life how much stuff takes place, and then you add that up for 365 days, there's definitely a lot of nuance. But yeah, that covers the bullet points.
So in following up with our prior discussion, clearly, there had been a lot of shock and surprise on both sides, from folks within both your Bible Belt community when you came out as gay, and then when you sort of came back, there were people within the LGBT community. So I just wanted to touch base with you. I know that there were a lot of people from both sides that you were still maintaining relationships with. So I do want to ask you that. How are some of those relationships from people that you met in our community? And then did you get anybody back from your church community in your life? Where do you stand right now with a lot of these folks?
Well, as time passes, people naturally fall in and out of your life. The good news is that a lot of my friends from my year that changed things and challenged my perspective so perfectly, they're still a part of my life. But once you kind of have kicked the dust from your heels and moved on, there without some kind of random chance occasion where you might encounter somebody. I've been pretty far. I spent most of the last 6-7 years in the Pacific Northwest. And then I spent a little bit less than a year in West Virginia while I was engaged to my wife, my now wife. And we got married and moved back down to Nashville to get things situated so that we could move back out to Portland. And so it's been really good being in Nashville because I'm back around a lot of the people that I built these relationships with, and fortunately, the ones that really mattered are there. The former church members and people like that. I don't even know really if I would make the effort to go speak to them if I saw them out in public.
No, totally understand. And I see that your book, having come out in October of 2012, of course, is going to be having a 4-year anniversary this year. So is it like a fine wine that matures with age? I mean, it's still, it's still on the Amazon list. Do you get current inquiries and responses? Are you doing book tours? It looks like it may even be hard to work on a new book.
Yeah, it's actually really interesting because when a book comes out, especially from an unknown first-time author, it typically has a very short shelf life. You get 90 days of relevance, and then it kind of fades off into obscurity. But the interesting thing about The Cross in the Closet is that I've always wanted it to become irrelevant very quickly, as a result of our society progressing and getting away from these antiquated, bigoted kind of anti-gay mindsets. And with every time an election year rolls around, it ends up getting brought back up because the Republicans try to motivate their donors with anti-LGBT sentiments, and then the liberals and Democrats, of course, are speaking to the issues of their constituents, the LGBT community, predominantly. Not to say there are no LGBT Republicans, but fewer, definitely. So, it always stirs the pot and brings everything back up, and it's really interesting to see us take a few steps forward and then take a few steps back and then take a few steps forward. So the book has still gotten quite a bit of attention, not only in the U.S. but worldwide. Last April, I was invited to come out and speak at TEDx University of the Aegean in Greece, and was blessed to be able to go do that. And I spent 18 minutes on stage. I prepped for probably 180 hours at least for that 18 minutes. But it's it's still getting attention. I recently got an email from some people in Australia doing a book club with it, and I've gotten some messages from churches that are doing book studies with it, and I'll be speaking in September at the University of Alberta doing what they call living story time. So you tell your story as though it's a book, which makes it a little bit easier for me because I already have a book about what I'm going to be talking about. So yeah, it's still getting a lot of attention and surprisingly still causing a lot of a stir with certain people. So it's been really good to be active and continually reminded that even though it came out almost 4 years ago now, it still is having an effect on the people that I really hoped it would, who have had very negative beliefs and stereotypes.
Well, that's
about
right.
LGBT
and
people.
If I recall correctly, when you were on The View, with Barbara Walters and Whoopi Goldberg and a few others, if I recall correctly, the producers wanted her to go on the attack, and she said she wasn't going to do that, and sort of sat silent in protest against her own producers during your interview.
Yeah, I wish I still had the print off. I think I may somewhere in storage back out in the Pacific Northwest, but I kept the list of questions that the producers had, and they had the questions, who wrote the questions, and who the questions were going to be asked by, and they gave them to you in advance, so you knew exactly, what to expect. And so the questions Whoopi was supposed to ask were very much meant to speak for the people who would take an issue with how I, did what I did, with the methodology I used, and whether it was ethical, whether it was what's the word, exploitative, that kind of thing. But when we were in the hair and makeup chairs and we were having conversations, she asked me several questions, and by the end of it said, I don't think I really have any questions to ask today. You pretty much answered all of them, and I really appreciate it. So, and then I got to hear her explaining all about my book to Hayden Panettiere, the talented actress on Nashville, who's been in a bunch of stuff, Heroes and Remember the Titans. So to get to hear Whoopi explaining my book was a little bit surreal too. So yeah, I feel like most people who have a negative reaction, once they actually read the book, or they have a conversation with me, or they hear an interview that's long enough where they can actually kind of feel like they've gotten to know me a little bit, they understand it was well intentioned, and even if they disagree with it, they're happy with the outcome and what's taken place since.
Well, I can tell you that I certainly haven't seen members of our community out there, on the street corners protesting this book, like, ban the book, don't let the book endorse. Like, I certainly haven't seen a revolt against your book. But I am curious. I noticed that you mentioned on social media that you are pulling, 70, 80-hour weeks and working on a next book. Is it a given that your next book is going to be some type of a breakaway? Is it a sequel? Are you going a different direction? Can you tell us anything about the next project?
Sure. It's actually kind of interesting because I've got 3 projects I'm working on the next book that's going to be released, Lord willing, will be out October, November. And basically what that book is a short, very, what's the word? A more complex version of my TED Talk, so to speak. I take the lessons and the morals from the Cross in the Closet, and I tried to make them applicable to anybody in a situation where you're going outside of your home and you're around people that are different from you. How do you have, fruitful relationships with people that are, diametrically your opposite? And what I talk about is practicing intentional empathy, trying to find common ground and to build rapport so that you can have fruitful relationships at work or in an organization or in a church, in any situation where you've got people that believe different things, which I believe is every situation. So it's going to be a shorter project, but it's going to be much more geared towards a broader audience, more of a business and organizational kind of minded audience. And I think the subtitle that I was kind of toying with was, a primer for civility in an uncivilized age, because of Donald Trump. So now
we're coming to Mr. Trump for sure.
Oh yeah, well exactly. Being back in Nashville, I'm back around my conservative roots, and the majority of the people in my life that I work with are very conservative, and it's been a good opportunity to have to practice what I preach and learn how to build bridges and learn how to empathize and have fruitful conversations and fruitful situations, interactions with people that I want to sit back and just yell at because they've told me they're voting for Trump. So I think this project is a good moral of the story after the fact for the Cross in the Closet. And then I've got another project that I'm working on that's a 3-part book that has to do with excessive traveling that I've done in the last few years, and will be doing a lot more in the next few years. And then I'm working on a documentary with a friend of mine. So it's been nuts, and trying to as a newlywed to make sure the bills are paid and make sure we've got everything that we need and we're taken care of, while at the same time trying to continue building and fostering a career and keep on producing stuff so that the people who have been interacting with me and following me continually have something to read.
Yes.
It's a juggling act, life.
Well,
so
say a writer
I just turned 30,
always.
so I'm no expert.
Now I do want to ask you about the unprecedented presidential campaign and rise of Donald Trump. So there is a lot of mounting dissent within the Republican Party right now. Just to give our listeners the major headlines of what's happened in the last 24 hours, as his May earnings have been reported to the FEC, it looks like he's currently holding a shockingly low amount of cash on hand of less than $2 million, and the spending from the Trump campaign, much of the money raised from his political campaign has gone into Donald Trump businesses and family members. So expect there to be some rising dissent within the party, some possible delegate revolts. But I just wanted to speak with you right now, Timothy, about hatred and about whether or not you personally feel that Trump has risen on the back of hate when it comes to the manner of his campaign, the tone and demeanor of his hate speech. What is your general take on Donald Trump, and what does he represent?
I think I can't even imagine what President Obama is feeling, sitting there knowing that he could possibly be, ushered out, only to have Donald Trump and crew ushered in. I feel like the Republicans, as critical as I was of Mitt Romney and John McCain post bringing on Sarah Palin as a running mate, I have at least always felt like Mitt Romney